Brooklyn is a borough in New York City, but Brooklyn is so big, honestly, it might as well be a city in itself, because you can live in Brooklyn, work in Brooklyn, and literally never have to leave because everything is there. You might be thinking of moving to Brooklyn or moving within Brooklyn, and you want to know what Brooklyn has to truly offer when it comes to housing. And I do have to say, honestly, Brooklyn has it all, like literally has it all. Did you know that Brooklyn borough is actually bigger than the entire city of Philadelphia? The whole city, just Brooklyn. I couldn't believe this fact when I heard it for the first time, that I actually didn't believe the person who I was talking to and had to like Google it, look it up myself, because I was so astonished at this fact. Like, just a borough is bigger than an entire city. Crazy. A lot of people move to Brooklyn because it's cheaper than Manhattan, but I do have to say, there's just so much more to Brooklyn. The culture, the food, the entertainment, the music, there's just so much that you can take advantage of when living in Brooklyn. And I do have to say, the price difference from Manhattan is pretty nice. If you're not familiar, Brooklyn is actually broken up into different kind of like regions, areas of Brooklyn. So you have Central Brooklyn, Eastern Brooklyn, Northern Brooklyn, Southern Brooklyn, but then you also have Northwestern Brooklyn and Southwestern Brooklyn. There's also different neighborhoods that encompass all these different areas of Brooklyn. Now, some sources online and some people don't talk about these specific regions. Like, some people might just say Southern Brooklyn or just say Northern Brooklyn, but this is technically how it's broken up from a real estate perspective. These different regions of Brooklyn are all going to be different from each other. It's very common for two neighborhoods right next to each other to be a little bit similar, but then if you go to a completely different like region of Brooklyn, they're going to be different. The closer you are to Manhattan, the more city-like it's going to feel there. So you're going to be more likely to have either townhomes, high-rises, apartments with amazing views of Manhattan because they're right outside Manhattan. You're going to get that vibe there. Certain neighborhoods are almost going to feel like you are in Manhattan still. The further out you go into Brooklyn, the less it's going to feel like a city. You're in Brooklyn, so you are still in New York City. I don't want to offend anybody with that, but it's going to feel very, very different than if you're closer to Manhattan. And what do I mean by different? Your apartments or homes are probably going to be bigger. You're going to have more space. The streets are going to be bigger. Going to be more space outside. Maybe even going to be more green space for you to enjoy. Nature. It will feel different. One thing also to keep in mind is that the further out you go, the less public transportation there is. New York City's really been trying to improve this over time. You might have to do a couple different transfers or take different forms of transportation to get where you're going, depending on where you're going in the city. What kind of homes can you actually find in Brooklyn? So like I said, you can find high-rise apartments, low-rise apartments, mid-rise apartments, and these can be both pre-war and post-war apartments. You can find a ton of new construction in Brooklyn. That's honestly also one of the reasons that people tend to move to Brooklyn from Manhattan or from just outside of the city in general, because they're set in living in new construction. You can find a ton of options in Brooklyn and for more affordable prices than you can in Manhattan. But there's also even just more new construction in Brooklyn than Manhattan because there's more opportunities for developers to build in Brooklyn than there is in Manhattan. So you'll find condos, co-ops, townhomes. Brooklyn is known for its amazing, gorgeous townhomes. There's nothing like Brooklyn townhomes. You will find walk-ups, elevator buildings, doorman buildings. You will find it all. And also, you can even find single family homes in Brooklyn, like literally houses in Brooklyn. A lot of people don't know that because when they think of Brooklyn, they just think of apartments and high-rises or maybe townhomes, but they don't think about how you can actually have a single family home that almost looks a little bit suburban inside in Brooklyn. It's gonna be way more likely for you to be able to get a balcony, a terrace, or even a yard in your apartment or home. How crazy is that? So many people move from Manhattan to Brooklyn because of this outdoor space. You can find it in Manhattan, but it's going to be very, very hard to find because there's not nearly as many homes that offer it in Manhattan, and it's going to be very, very expensive and competitive. Because of that, so many people go to Brooklyn so that they can finally have this outdoor space. Did you know that there are actually mansions in some areas of Brooklyn? Yes, mansions, like literal mansions. Now you're pretty much finding this in the southern Brooklyn because if you're living close to Manhattan, you're definitely not going to have enough space for a whole mansion, but there are actually mansions, like suburban looking mansions that exist in Brooklyn. And if you go to southern Brooklyn and just walk the streets, you'll see them, and it's actually so cool. It's amazing to see all the different types of housing that exist in just one borough. Now, one thing I do want you to keep in mind is that even though Brooklyn is going to be less expensive than Manhattan, it still is a little pricey. And as more and more neighborhoods become developed in Brooklyn, the prices are just going higher and higher and higher. So it is something I want you to keep in mind. Gentrification is a real thing. If you do compare Manhattan to Brooklyn, it will be cheaper though. New York City in general is just an expensive place to live. So I'm actually going to give you a fact about Brooklyn housing. The average one-bedroom rental at the time of this video, which is September 2023, at the time of this video, the average median rent is for a 1-bedroom, $3,995, almost $4,000. Kind of crazy. You would think probably in your mind that a 1-bedroom would be cheaper, but telling you, Brooklyn, pretty pricey nowadays. Now let's talk about for sale. The median home price in general in Brooklyn is $784,000. That's not going to be for a specific bedroom number. That's just going to be for home prices in general, but that's the median. It's going to really, really vary, the prices, depending on where you live in Brooklyn. The closer you live to Manhattan, the more expensive it's going to be, for the most part. So I want you to keep that in mind. But if you're moving to Brooklyn or looking to move to Brooklyn, there are so many options for you. So many different neighborhoods, regions of Brooklyn. So I want you to really spend your time exploring Brooklyn because there's just so much to see. So many different little neighborhoods, so many places to go. And depending on what lifestyle you want to live, there's going to be different neighborhoods that I would recommend for that. But there literally is something for everyone here. And a different type of home for everyone here because you can find everything here. So I hope that helped you understand Brooklyn a little bit more. Have you lived in Brooklyn before, or are you thinking about living to Brooklyn? Because as always, I just love hearing from you guys.